Okay, so hi everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. So welcome and thank you for joining today's panel on finding ways to have a great first year as a graduate student. I'm Ona Ambrozaite, a PhD student in chemistry and Futures Fellow here at Johns Hopkins, and I will be the moderator of this panel. We're so happy that you are here on this Thursday morning in Baltimore. And in a moment, I will give a brief introduction of each of our panelists and then ask them questions. So the goal of panels like the one we have today is to help students gain insights and skills needed to launch their graduate school career with expert advice from faculty, professionals, and current graduate students. So today, we have three wonderful panelists: Kosiso Ugwueze, writing seminars, Master of Fine Arts student at Hopkins. Then Brent Ifemembi, a PhD student in precision medicine and biomolecular engineering at Hopkins. And Dr. Jacki Stone, who is the Director of Student Wellbeing at the Johns Hopkins University. So audience, I will leave time at the end for your questions, but I encourage you to add questions to the chat at any time. The session will end at 11:50 a.m. and we will have a brief kind of take-home message time at around 11:45. So without much ado, welcome Jacki, Brent, and Kosiso. We'll begin with a more general question about the very first months of your time here at Johns Hopkins. What were they like, and were there any immediate challenges? So Kosiso, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you, Ona. Thank you to the Life Design Lab for having this. Ooh, I'm hearing feedback. You guys hear that?
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Thank you for Life Design Lab for having me on this panel. I'm delighted to be here to share my experiences of my first year as a grad student. As Ona said, I am an MFA candidate here at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm studying fiction. I think this year was especially, it has been a challenging year for various reasons, especially due to the global pandemic. And so I spent my first entire year actually in California. And so I was zooming in California on the West Coast, where most of my classmates were on the East Coast. And so it was, you would hear me say multiple times throughout this panel that community is so important to the writer. And so it was really challenging. In the first few months, I felt like, am I really in grad school? Like, is this real? But I think the MFA program here, the writing seminars, did an excellent job of having sort of extracurricular activities over Zoom. So we had like Zoom happy hours, and like we had like literary readings. We had authors coming and read over Zoom. And so there were opportunities for us to sort of like build community and feel like we were actually in a grad program together. And so I think the first few months were challenging in that it felt sort of weird not being on a campus and not sort of having that experience of like being together with your classmates. But I think that, it worked out pretty well in that there were opportunities for Zoom, Zoom parties and stuff like that.
Great, thank you, Brent.
So I'm a second year student, and thank you, Ona, again for the great introduction on this. I'm a second year PhD student in the Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering Lab. So in my first year, at least, it was before the pandemic started, so I was able to be on campus. So I had a little bit of a different experience. I would say my first few months was I would say it was a good experience. Moving to Baltimore, like moving to a new city is always difficult. Finding places to go, places to eat at. But I think that the way my program is set up, that we're not a match with an advisor right away. So our first few months are looking for an advisor, but we're all taking the same core classes. So the thing that was helpful about that is that you build a really good sense of camaraderie with other people in your cohort. We're always in the library studying for like exams or homework. So it was nice for us to like get that level of chemistry so that even outside of research, you have a group of friends that you want to hang out with when lab is stressful, when life is stressful, people you can talk to. So our class is really close as a cohort. So I think that was good.
Awesome. And now we'll go in deeper into each individual program and see what it's like. So Kosiso, you are a Pushkar Prize nominated writer and editor, and you have published multiple short stories in literary journals. Could you describe what it feels like to transition from being a freelance writer to a first-year graduate student in the Writing Seminars MFA program?
Yeah, absolutely. And so prior to coming to Hopkins, I was sort of publishing fiction and nonfiction in sort of literary journals and magazines, and trying to build community by going to writing conferences and writers' workshops. And I think that what was challenging was sort of about that was like sort of having a core group. You would go to different writing conferences and you meet different people, and then they disperse to different corners of the country and the globe, and then you never see them again. And you try to sort of maintain community via Slack or Twitter or whatever, and it just sort of like fizzles out, which is sort of like not, it's sort of a function of just something that can be helped. And so I think the transition into being an MFA candidate at Hopkins has sort of given me a kind of a core group of people. Our program is very small. It's like 4 fiction writers and 4 poets. And so you sort of have like, you can have an intimate relationship with your classmates. The workshops are small. You can, have one-on-one conversations with your professors outside of class. And so that having that sort of community and that set structure was really what, coming to the program is really all about.
Great. And Brent, as you mentioned, you were a second year, growing third-year PhD student in Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering Department. And then Jacki, you have graduated with a PhD in Language, Literacy, and Culture from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County last year. So looking back at when you were in your first year of the PhD program, are there any things you would have done differently?
So I think that, I guess, knowing that before the pandemic was going to start, I probably would have done a lot more of like the social activities outside of the program, maximize that before we were shut down. But outside of that, I think I was pretty happy with how much I did in my first year. I think that like the one thing that a lot of people don't do, I think I made it a point of emphasis from talking to older students, was to try and join a lot of extracurricular activities. Try and join clubs that you might be interested in, at least while your course, like while your lab work isn't dominating your life. So I think that you should do a lot of that in the beginning so you can find what you want to keep on doing in addition to your lab work, because you can't do it all. So you can start to find what clubs interest you and what clubs don't. And you can keep that going as you get more and more involved with your degree.
Great. And Jacki?
Yeah, I've had a really unique experience because I completed 2 master's degrees and now my PhD. And one master's degree, I had an assistantship, and so I was a full-time student. And the second, which I am an alum of Johns Hopkins School of Education, full-time and doing a master's program. I got married during that time, and I even transitioned jobs during my PhD, I think. Actually both. Lots of change and transition. So I think just figuring out like the schedule that works as we balance life. I know for me, working full-time, like by the time and demanding jobs, right? Like by the time I got home from work, it was really hard to want to read or be connected. I wanted to spend time with my new husband, with my dogs. And so I just knew pretty early on that like the weekends were the time that I was going to focus on reading and writing. And I was able to do that with the rigor of my program. I'm also very efficient in my reading and writing. And so I think figuring out that schedule that really works. And I think everyone's social connections look different. If you're transitioning to a new city, I've lived in Baltimore for like 12 years now. If you're transitioning, like, do you want to get connected to a meetup and things like that? Or like family that you want to stay connected to, and what's that schedule? And doing the best you can to like think about a schedule and knowing that the flexibility is really there. I think academically speaking, for a PhD program, I wish I would have like narrowed in on my topic like a little earlier. I had an idea of what I was going to do when I came in, and that transformed with the beauty of intellectual learning that happened in the classroom. And I learned pretty early on, but that's always the advice I give to folks. As soon as you can start thinking about really what you're focusing on, to start to triangulate your assignments and your like elective coursework, if that's an opportunity, on that topical area, so everything funnels out to the very big book report that you're writing at the end.
Got it. Great. So as we can, probably the audience as well can tell, all of you are very socially active. So how did that affect your early graduate school experience? And we can start with Kosiso.
So as I said, my graduate experience, my first year of grad school was over Zoom. And so it was, I think a lot of it was very modern in that it was all digital and all like online. So it was like via text messages and, group texts and Twitter and social media. So that's really how I maintained community throughout the first year of my grad experience, was sort of like in this sort of digital realm. And I think there's sort of like there's drawbacks to it, obviously, but I think it's sort of like as writers, it's not, being able to send someone a text message is sort of like, and as someone who's an introvert, it worked out in a way for me, not having sort of like the social pressure. But at the same time, it's sort of like you're missing that connection with people in person.
Okay. And Brent, you had the privilege almost now to have a pre-COVID experience in graduate school. What was that like?
Yes, I think that it's definitely, like as Dr. Jacki said in her last answer, like it's definitely like a balancing act, trying to balance your time and your commitments, especially if you sign up to be like a leadership member in a lot of different organizations, which I did early on too. So like balancing those responsibilities as well as balancing your coursework and balancing like getting acclimated in like a new lab with also learning, like for me, it was a completely new field that I've never done any work in. So trying to get myself up to speed on like the research or trying to learn all these new experiments and methods. So I think it's definitely finding a way to balance your time. Time management is important. Regardless of your social commitments, just time management is important in order to finish your degree. So I think this like trying to find ways to be more efficient with using your time.
Okay.
Just wanted to add something real quick on time management. I think it's really about figuring out your boundaries. Like there were a couple holidays that I made the decision to not go home to see my family. They live about 600 miles away. And I knew that I needed to get some work done. And again, I have a partner, and I was able to not be alone, and that was okay for me. And so figuring out what's going to feel better in the long run, I think, is a really great thing. What are your boundaries that you need to create with your friends? What are the boundaries that you need to create with your advisors or your colleagues that you have partnership with? And I think that really is a big part of well-being in the transition.
And yeah, thanks, Jacki. And going off of that, how can first year students use social activities effectively to maintain their well-being, Jacki?
I think grad school is really different than undergrad. And so you may not get to be the president of 14 organizations. You may not want to. I would actually really encourage against it. Really think about like one or two give you what you need, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. If you really need to have those co-curricular things, what is it that you need? And so it's probably some self-reflection to think about, how do I stay engaged? And again, letting your friends, your family, your colleagues know, like, at 9 o'clock, I'm shutting down. I'm not answering texts, or I'm not going to be in these spaces. And you really have to figure out what works for you and how you work in those core aspects of well-being, your sleep, your nutrition, moving your body in a way that feels really good to you. and your just general organization, so that you can figure out how to be engaged in the spaces where you're engaged. We have so many distractions, right? Email and messages and Slack and all of these notifications. Manage those things so that you can be really present in the spaces that you step into. And I absolutely encourage folks to get involved. So that is not a deterrent to get connected. Like, find spaces where you can talk to other people if you are experiencing stressors, or but make sure that there's time to unplug from the work, right? If you're with your cohort mates, that like you're not only talking about the work all the time, that you're talking about world events, going to new and exciting places as the world permits us to do. Those are really important components.
Mm-hmm. Great, that's excellent advice. So now we'll move on to this also topic of student organizations. So what's your take on joining a student organization in addition to being a first-year graduate student? So we'll go with Brent.
Right. I definitely think, like, going off of Dr. Jacki's answer, I definitely think that, you know, being intentional too about like the student organizations you join is important. I think that it's useful, especially for me being like a underrepresented minority here at Hopkins. It was important for me to look for some type of affinity group like the BGSA, which is the Black Graduate Student Association, so I can at least not feel so isolated. You know, sometimes you want to talk to people who look like you, who are going through like similar experiences to you, especially older students who might have some advice that they can impart on you. So I would say that definitely don't sign up for 100 different things, but at least pick maybe 2 or 3, whatever you can manage in your schedule. And don't be afraid to, like, if you're not clicking with the group, don't be afraid to cut them off. You know, your time is very important. So just find what works for you and keep the ones that, I guess, at least make you feel good, or, you know, can give you some type of stress relief, and just keep it moving, I guess, after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. Great. So I think we'll move on to the next question then. In STEM fields, as a first-year graduate student, you need to choose a group you will be doing your degree in. So again, Brent, how did you go about making this important choice?
Right. So I think for me, it was mainly a research lab. I think like I made this choice because I know what I wanted to do after. So I was trying to find a path or a program that where I could be a part of a lab that was able to like at least give me some of the skills that I needed to do afterwards. So for me, I think I would advise people to think about what you want to do after your degree, and then see what helps as like a stepping stone to get to that point. I think there are a lot of great programs, there are a lot of great labs here at Hopkins. So you're gonna have a lot of great options. So you just have to find it for you.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Brent. So as we all know, graduate school can be tough, especially in the beginning. So who would you turn to when things would not work as you'd like? So anyone, Kosiso or Jacki or Brent can jump in.
I can jump in really quickly. I think what was great about the MFA's program at Hopkins is that you're paired with an advisor. So right off the bat, if you have someone, a professor who's like gonna sort of be your mentor throughout they're gonna look at your first year portfolio, they're going to be in charge of your thesis. And so what I did was that I sort of set up appointments. So I would meet bi-weekly with my advisor just to talk about questions I had about writing, questions I had about the program. So there's something that if you have that opportunity, if there's an assigned advisor, to make sure that you're on that person's calendar and that you're having regular meetings with this professor or mentor figure. And if it's not an assigned advisor, I would encourage first year grad students to sort of look for someone in your program who you think could serve as some kind of mentor figure, someone you can go to. And then also don't be afraid to sort of find peers, people in your program who, maybe someone who's a second year, someone who's, a little bit further along, and be able to, build a relationship with that person, have that person be someone you can ask questions that you might not maybe feel comfortable asking a professor, stuff like that.
If anyone has anything to add, I see a question from an audience member just outside of Toronto, as you can see. Do you have any advice for incoming international graduate students about navigating the life and moving to Baltimore? And as the audience member said, moving is already a hard process, even non-COVID times. So how do we do it these days when even meetings and signing leases is difficult? How to get around when you're physically removed from where your new life will begin. So if any of you have any insight in that.
I have a few university-based resources that I think, and city-based resources that folks can absolutely look at. Wellness.jhu.edu. You don't need any login information. You can just go visit. Again, wellness.jhu.edu is kind of the portal to all wellness-related resources. So both direct and indirect, right? And so if you're thinking about, again, the affinity groups that you've heard about here, mentorship groups, how to use health insurance, which is so different in the US than in other places. That is a really great central place to get you to where you want to go. And you can search by school, you can search by physical location, or you can search by keywords. So if you wanted to look up insurance, or you wanted to think about financial well-being, you could search in some of those search terms and it'll get you to the resources that you want to get to in that place. Another place, city website that I think has been really great, as I've seen a lot of folks transition in my 12 years here, is the iHeart City Life, or the Baltimore City websites that will give you a really great sense of neighborhoods. And the university also, it is primarily targeted towards undergrad on this page, but there's an off-campus student services, they have connections to apartment listings, activities, things like that. And so there's definitely people and services who can help you that process. But I think the peer mentorship is really key, right? Get connected to people okay, this website says this is a great neighborhood to live in, but what does that mean? Tell me, where do you live? Do you like it? Is it affordable? Because there is a wide range of neighborhoods. Baltimore is absolutely a city of neighborhoods. And so figuring out some of those logistics, if you'll have a car, do you need access to the shuttle? Are you interested in walking? Sometimes it's cold here, not relative to Canada, but just kind of balancing those things. Again, when you get those in place and you have that firm foundation, it allows you to make other choices and about connections, your well-being, that I think are really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So Jacki, we have one more question for you. So what are some simple daily choices or changes we can make to avoid being overwhelmed by being in graduate school?
So that's a great question. I think well-being has gotten a really specific, there's a market for well-being in the world, right? And it is based on a very specific socioeconomic status. It can also be very what and manicures and things like that. And for me, well-being is the daily choices that we make in favor of our health. And there is science to back up how some of these choices impact us, right? What lowers our blood pressure, what is scientific about how we fuel our bodies. But you best, and you've cultivated habits up until this point. And so just thinking about how those, now, before you get started, how have those habits really enabled you to be successful or have presented challenges? And so really thinking about how much sleep do you need? Sleep is just so critical to your well-being. And I see our students nodding emphatically. But it's hard, right? You're a 7 to 9 hour person. You got to make time for that. And so is that a schedule? Is that a Google Calendar or an Outlook calendar thing that's a reminder on your phone to say, it's time to put the work down and to decompress? Putting your phone down before you that would be really great. I'm not always great at following it, but it's important, right? The blue light, just the stimulation. About sleep, nutrition, again, like I don't subscribe to any particular like dogma about what folks should eat. I don't believe in harmful foods, but what fuels your body for what you need? How do you move your body, and what do you need to put into it to achieve that, both in focus? Do you get sleepy at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you're in class? Like, how do you balance those things? So just really some self-reflection about what's been working. And I truly believe that well-being is like daily decisions, sometimes hourly decisions, right? Are you someone who has a negative reaction to caffeine, but like you also kind of need it sometimes? Like, figure out what that is and when that's timed in your day. And it looks different for everyone. So I don't think there's any one specific piece. I know for me, especially when I was writing my dissertation, it was really important for me to have activity. So I would go and take my dog for a super long walk. It would make him tired so I could sit down and do the work. It became really like to me as well. And so that when I sat down to do the writing, I was prepared. My body was in a great place. My mind was ready to work. And so I think those are just some examples, but it's going to be different for everybody. The other piece that I just really want to encourage, if you have had a lot of success with a mental health provider, we all know that like mental telehealth and things like that are during this pandemic. So think about how you need to transition that care and maintain those interventions in your life that have served you really well. Do you have medication management? Start preparing how you're going to transfer those things. Those are activities of daily living that are going to be so critical to your success. And if you don't have those, haven't had access to those resources, we'll absolutely get you connected to them here. And that wellness.jhu.edu is a great place to figure out what some of those resources are. And I can answer any questions about mental health. We do have a telehealth service that will be in place for the next year. And so the Calm app, we have lots of really great resources that you can try on and see like, this didn't really work for me today. That's great. That doesn't mean it's out forever. Maybe you want to try it again in a couple days or a couple weeks. Right? Things are here for you to try on, figure out what works for your schedule, and go from there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I don't know if Kosiso or Brent have any kind of tips that you have discovered over these past few years that really help you be grounded, as they say.
Right. I would say that answer was amazing. I didn't even know about all the resources that she mentioned there that I'm definitely going to check out. One thing that I would suggest as well, which is more of like a mindset shift, is sometimes when you're joining a new university or new with a lot of other people, you can be like overwhelmed. You might fall into some like imposter syndrome, comparing yourself to others. I would say like that's also you have to make that like this is your own journey. You're going on it like by yourself, like, not going on it by yourself. Like you have your classmates, you have family behind you, but at the end of the day, you're guiding your own path. So you shouldn't compare yourself to other people. You shouldn't try to work yourself so hard that you can finish it all in your first year. Like that's not going to happen. Like I think it's important to make sure that you prioritize your own health and you prioritize your happiness over some day-to-day experiments and stuff that you encounter like along the way. So just making sure that's an active choice in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So do you have anything to add?
I think I'll add just quickly. I think at sort of a big university, they're going to be like countless. I think Dr. Jacki touched upon this. There are going to be countless activities to get involved with, and I think sort of like being able to know when to step back and say no would also be helpful because like grad school can be challenging. The work itself can be challenging, and so like knowing where your limits are and being able to sort of say I'm gonna take a break from Zoom for the next 50 minutes or whatever, sort of like taking care of that aspect of your health, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that. And I guess this is kind of a follow-up question to this. So we know that the programs you're in are quite intense. So writing seminars MFA program, you have to think about your first year portfolio, literary seminars, and in PhD programs, you're responsible for excelling classes, being a teaching assistant often, and likely doing research in the laboratory. So with so many responsibilities to handle as a first year, are there any tips to how to do this and also stay successful, healthy, and happy from the very, very beginning? And Brent or Kosiso, you can jump in.
I think the thing is to sort of, I think time management is something that's really important because, in the MFA program, first semester, we don't teach, but the second semester we have to teach intro to creative writing, and so, you have to, you're the only instructor in the class. You are responsible for coming up with the syllabus. You're responsible for being in class every day and teaching. And so I think managing your time wisely, what I did personally was I used winter break to come up with my lesson plan. And so when I went into teaching, I had sort of like all my PowerPoints done. I had my syllabus done. I sort of had like my lesson plan for every day of the semester done. And that's something I had to do over winter break because I couldn't do it during the semester. And and it's winter break, you're supposed to be resting, you're supposed to be, decompressing. But it really helped me manage my stress during the semester when I had to be teaching. And while I'm teaching, I'm not also trying to come up with my lesson plan and figure out, manage classes at the same time because I was reading 2 novels every week. So I think managing your time, like using your breaks to sort of, rest, yes, but also sort of like plan ahead and sort of think about what's coming up next, I think is helpful in managing stress.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that from the PhD side. And Brent, do you have anything?
One thing I would add to that as well, like time management is very important. I would also add, like try and find, at least for me, it was helpful to find other people in my lab, either alumni or older students who have gone through their first year. I kind of asked them like what were things that they would avoid and try and find kind of like a mini mentor. So I think they'll help you to make sure that you can, like every program is different, so they'll help you navigate your own program a little bit better, more efficiently. And also trying to find like a group of people that can help get your mind off the lab, like a group of people that you want to get to the park with, play tennis with, or go on walks with. That's very key. Like no matter what program you're in, you need those type of people around you. So yeah, those are some tips I'll have.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. So then we all mentioned this concept of having a community, like friends, right, who would support us. So what's the best way to maintain such a supportive community inside and outside of graduate school, knowing that first-year students often don't have someone they're familiar with from the very first day? And I guess this also relates to the audience question that came before for international graduate students. How do you deal with that? So anyone, Brent, Jacki, or Kosiso can start.
I can jump in. Mm-hmm. I think something that when I got admitted, we had this sort of, it was like the pandemic had started and we had like a Zoom welcome. And then afterwards, one of my classmates like Googled me and found my Twitter and sort of like sent me a message and said, "Hi, we're going to be in the same program. Like, how are you?" And then like we started talking on WhatsApp. So I mean, I'm not saying like, I don't think it's, don't be afraid to sort of like, if you know who's going to be in your program, if you've sort of met them virtually or in some capacity, don't be afraid to sort of reach out and say hello. I'm going to be in the program starting in the fall, and maybe we can be friends or roommates or whatever. I think sort of like reaching out over the summer and sort of trying to build some kind of relationship with your classmates before you get to school, get to campus, can sort of help ease you into life as a grad student. So And there's like, different avenues to do that. If you have their email or something like that, maybe Twitter might not be the best, might not be the best for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jacki, do you know or suggest any resources for people who are looking for such a supportive community?
Absolutely. I think what Kosiso said was spot on. There's obviously like grads, like the grad governance organizations, GRO. I think they have different names in different schools. But those are kind of like, I think of pour and mix, right? Like a cake mix. You're just adding water and some eggs, you stir, you got a community there. And they're going to plan events and have opportunities to get connected. I think the other piece that gives a lot of folks meaning is service. And so if there's a particular community organization that you found meaning in prior to this experience, like, can you get connected to a group that's like the Boys and Girls Club or an environmental organization? We have all of those here in Baltimore as well. And so just kind of doing some Googling about what gives you meaning in your life. So you've got, again, that sort of separation and connect with folks in that way. Baltimore College Town is like a network of all the Baltimore area, just outside of the city as well. Schools, and again, they have undergrad programs, they have graduate mixers and things like that. I don't know how that's necessarily evolved in the pandemic, but if nothing else, Zoom. But to really like challenge yourself a little bit if you're not like a naturally outgoing person, to connect, like just message one person that you liked what they said in that introduction or something and be like, do you want to go for a walk? Like the worst thing anyone's going to say is no, thank you. And when they don't know you, it's so not personal either, right? But everyone's juggling all of these different schedules and like aspects of their lives. So just think about the things that have really brought you joy in other places and how do you replicate that here, whether it's temporary or in the long term. I think will be super successful. I think the boundaries piece continues to be really important, letting your friends know, I need you to check in on me once a week. Like I might not reach out, but like if you have the bandwidth, like text me and give me a little reminder if I don't respond. Like those are really great tools to help you stay connected with folks when it might not be at the forefront of your mind all the time. It's labor on their part also, right? But when you've got those really close relationships, I think that's a really helpful way to do it. My partner had no concept of what I was studying or this work. And so sometimes I would talk to him and he would nod and smile, but like blank face, right? So it's really helpful sometimes to have people who know the experience, a mentor, someone who's gone through a different graduate program. And then sometimes it's really great to have someone who just has no idea and they're just going to nod and smile, but you've gotten it out and you've stated it, and that's helpful as well.
Okay. Brent, if you have anything to add.
No, I think those answers are nothing else.
Great. So going along this same kind of thread that Jacki mentioned, the mentorship, in your own experience, how did you reach out for help? I know Kosiso mentioned briefly in one of her answers. So how do you ask for help? How do you not be afraid of appearing vulnerable to people? I guess the question is, in your experience, have you had to do it? How did you do it? And what was the experience like?
Is this for me?
This could be for anyone.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I would say like a large part of graduate school, I'm living this right now, is like failure. Like your experiments, the things that your hypothesis, they're not going to work. And maybe the first few times you might be new to you, but you're going to get used to it very quickly. So I think like embracing that and not thinking it's the end of the world when something does go wrong, and not being embarrassed by it in order to bring it up with people who have gone through the same journey as you. So like for me, when things don't go my way, I'm pretty open about discussing it with people who are older than me or people who have people who are at different stages of the programs, because they normally have good advice on how I can go about trying to fix it for the next time. So I'll just say be open about like sharing some of the struggles that you're going through. Everyone's been through it before, so it's helpful to get off your chest and also to maybe get some good advice.
Yeah, I want to, I think that's an excellent answer. Jump on that. I think it's something that takes, like everything else, it takes it's practice. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. And, like in the writing seminars, when you're, you're doing coursework, but you're also sort of testing the waters and like sending some of your, like, as a writer, like, I think rejection has to be something that you sort of get used to, because you're sending your stuff, just get into an MFA program that has 4 fiction students is something that's, so, you've already, knowing that, you getting into this program that you're in, you've already been vulnerable, you've already have the practice. And so like being confident that, you can actually be like, do it. And so I just think that it's just takes something that takes practice. And like, I think if you're in a graduate program, I'm confident that you're sort of the kind of person who can work with vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Going to add, like, be vulnerable. I hear all the time on social media or in other spaces, like the toxicity of this around mental health or help seeking. And we can all be the change in that, right? We can say, like, I'm struggling. You don't have to name every aspect of your struggle in that moment, right? You don't have to disclose too much, only what you're comfortable with. But when we all collectively start talking about, like, gosh, life's hard right now. Like there's multiple pandemics happening in this moment. We have cicadas coming, all the things. Like, how do we take a moment and talk about that? And I think when we can do that more frequently and with more ease, that's actually going to change the culture to invite people to be more vulnerable. So I challenge all of you to think about how you can show up in ways that really challenge some of the norms, and garner support and give support in that same way.
Yeah, agree with everything you said. Yes. Great. So now we're coming sort of towards the end of our time here. So what would be your top advice for making this first year of graduate school and a truly amazing one? You can start with anyone, Kosiso or Brent or Jacki.
I'll go first.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I would say is, like, me, I'm not normally like an extrovert. I'm more so quiet and shy. Like that's how I was in undergrad too, and I didn't really like get to meet a lot of people. But I would say, like, in your first year, I think it's important because I think the first year is usually the year where you're probably the least busy. It may seem like you have a lot of classes and stuff like that, but at least in my program, the first year is probably the best year because you haven't joined the lab and you don't have a bunch of experiments. You don't have an advisor who's giving you a lot of work to do. So I think it's the best time to like try and meet as many people as you can. Try and join as many organizations that you're comfortable, you have time to do, to figure out what's going to support you when things do get tough. Like I think it's so helpful to have a group of people from a lot of different programs that you can talk to and you can talk to outside of your research, and just like a good network of friends. So I would say push yourself at least to try and talk to like other people. Don't just like isolate yourself, because then when things do get tough, it's going to be even lonelier as well. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer. I think definitely my first semester was it gets increasingly busier as you go along. I think my piece of advice would be to have a plan. I think just sort of, and it doesn't have to be like, a very detailed, like meticulous plan, but just to have a general idea of what you want to get out of the program that you're in, whether it's, writing or engineering or, STEM or the humanities, just having a general idea of what you want to get out of the program or what some of your, it might not be, your post-graduation plans, but just having some general, thoughts about, do you want to be, an expert in some capacity? Do you want to learn how to do something new? Do you want to push yourself out of your comfort zone and learn something completely different. You know, just having some general idea of what you want to get out of the program, I think would be guide you as, you know, when things get a little, you know, rough or confusing, or you feel kind of lost, that you can go back to some kind of plan and say, okay, and put yourself back on track.
Such great answers happening here today. I think my advice is to remind yourself regularly that your well-being is critical to and like absolutely just part of your academic success. It is not in conflict with, it is not in opposition to, like, taking care of yourself. And again, that might look different from day to day. Like sometimes there is less sleep to be had, but how do you take the steps to kind of right yourself and get back on track? And it's your track, it's not everybody else's track. But absolutely, those daily check-ins with yourself, with your community, to say, like, how am I taking care of myself so that I can be the best student? And it is part of the nutrition, the movement, the mental health, the meditation, all of those pieces. How you spend your money is all going to be part of you being really successful in your chosen career, in the classroom, in the lab, in all of the spaces. And so every day, just little reminders. And if that's Post-its around your room, if that's a reminder on your device, or check-ins with the people that you love, get into that routine of just noticing and then making those tiny tweaks. It's not about like, I've never worked out before and now I'm going to run a marathon. Micro decisions about what you're putting in your body and what you're putting out into the world, I think, is really important.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, we have reached the end of our session, and I want to just clap, of course, virtually, and give a huge thank you to Brent, Kosiso, and Jacki. Thank you, of course, to those of you who have joined us. The next sessions will begin at noon. The first option would be titled, How Do I Bring My Identities to Graduate School? And the second option is pre-prof drop-ins. So I really hope you will join us. And again, thank you to our panelists and the audience.
Excellent. Thank you for having us.
Wishing everyone the best.
All right. The broadcast has ended.